Welcome to Firesquid Capital Funding Edge, where we talk about alternative lending strategies that can help get you funded quickly. Today, we're diving deep into Firesquid Capital's latest market research report. It's called 7 Best Seed Money Funding Options for Startups in 2025. We're going to unpack these alternative paths to funding, and we'll help you understand which might be your golden ticket.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be a startup. Firesquid Capital found that over 500,000 new businesses were registered globally just last year, and a whopping 60% of them were in tech. But here's the thing. Traditional funding routes, they just aren't cutting it for most of them.
Right, like imagine missing your window of opportunity.
Yeah.
Because you're stuck waiting 6.12 months. For a traditional loan or VC funding, that's where these alternative options come in. Speed is everything for startups, and these new avenues can get you funded much faster. To give you a sense of just how much faster, Firesquid Capital found that companies securing funding in the first 6 months are 40% more likely to succeed.
Exactly. So let's break down these 7 alternative funding options. First up, we've got peer-to-peer lending platforms. These platforms connect you directly with investors, cutting out the banks and their often lengthy processes.
Also, it's like a matchmaking service for startups and investors.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the best part is, Firesquid Capital's data shows that these platforms have a 20% higher approval rate than traditional loans. Plus, you often get more flexible terms because you're dealing directly with individuals who may be more open to new ideas and risk.
That's a great point.
Now let's move on to crowdfunding platforms. This is a really interesting option. Because it's about so much more than just money, it allows you to build a community around your product or service before you even launch.
It's almost like a built-in marketing campaign, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Get people excited about your idea, gather valuable feedback, and potentially even get pre-orders. And Firesquid Capital found that companies using crowdfunding get an average of 18% more initial funding. That's a huge advantage, but why is that?
I think it comes down to validation. When you see a large number of people putting their money behind an idea, it sends a strong signal to other potential investors that this is a company worth betting on. It's like a seal of approval from the crowd.
Okay, on to option number 3, microloans. Now, these are perfect for startups that maybe don't need a massive influx of cash right away, but still need a boost to get things moving.
Yeah, think of them as the bite-sized loans of the startup world. They're typically smaller amounts, perfect for covering initial operating expenses or launching a pilot program. And get this, microloans have an impressive 70% approval rate and a processing time of just 2 to 4 weeks, compared to the 3 to 6 months you might be waiting for a traditional loan.
Wow, that's lightning fast. Now, this next option is a bit different. Incubator and accelerator programs. They're like boot camps for startups, providing not only funding, but also mentorship, resources, and a whole network of support.
Yeah, it's about surrounding yourself with experienced guides who have been there and done that. And the results are really impressive. Firesquid Capital's data shows that startups that go through these programs have a 35% higher chance of securing that coveted Series A funding within 2 years.
Speaking of Series A funding, for those who are new to the startup world, that's basically the first significant round of funding a company raises after seed funding. It typically comes from venture capital firms and signals that a startup is ready to scale. So that 35% increase in chances is a big deal.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about revenue-based financing. This is a really interesting model because your payments are directly tied to your revenue. So if your revenue is low, your payments are low. If your revenue grows, your payments increase proportionally.
That takes a lot of the pressure off, especially in those crucial early months. You're not saddled with a fixed payment, regardless of how your business is doing. To get more information about Firesquid Capital and its lending products, visit firesquidcapital.com.
Exactly. It's all about aligning your financial obligations with your actual income. It's a very sustainable way to grow, especially for startups in the early stages. Now, for an option many startups overlook, grants. Essentially, grants are free money for your business that doesn't have to be repaid. Sounds pretty great, right?
Free money. Sign me up.
Yeah.
But I imagine they're incredibly competitive. What kind of insights did Firesquid Capital have about grants?
They are competitive, but don't let that discourage you. Firesquid Capital found that companies securing grants actually see more success in later funding rounds.
Interesting. So even if you don't get a huge amount of funding from a grant, it can actually boost your credibility and make it easier to secure funding later on.
Yeah.
It's like a stamp of approval.
Exactly. And last but not least, we have business lines of credit. Think of this as a safety net for your startup. It's a pre-approved pool of money you can tap into whenever you need it, without having to go through a new application process each time.
This can be a game changer for handling unexpected expenses. And when Firesquid Capital surveyed startup founders, they found that 80% reported decreased stress levels when they had a business line of credit in place.
Yeah, that peace of mind is incredibly valuable, especially in those early, often volatile
Hmm.
days of your business. Instead of scrambling to find funding for every unexpected cost, you have that safety net ready to go.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. 7 distinct alternative funding options, each with its own advantages and ideal use cases. But how do you know which one is right for your startup? What questions should you be asking yourself when considering these options?
That's where things get really interesting. Let's dive into some real-world examples to see how these funding options can play out in practice. Firesquid Capital's report features some fascinating case studies, and I think they'll be really helpful for you to hear.
Perfect. Let's take a look at how real startups are using these alternative funding options to achieve their dreams. To get more information about Firesquid Capital and its lending products, visit firesquidcapital.com.
Okay, so let's start with Anya and EcoBloom. Anya was developing this incredible sustainable packaging using biodegradable mushroom-based materials. Talk about innovative. She had a solid business plan and a prototype ready, but she needed $75,000 to really launch. Traditional funding was going to take 12 months, and she knew time was money in her market.
So she turned to Firesquid Capital's report and realized that alternative funding could be her solution. What did she end up doing?
She decided to leverage a combination of peer-to-peer lending and a small grant she secured for sustainable businesses. This allowed her to raise $80,000 in just 3 months.
Wow, that's a fantastic example of how a blended approach can work. The grant not only provided some funding, but likely also boosted her credibility with the peer-to-peer lenders.
Exactly. It's like a signal that her business has merit. And the speed at which she secured funding allowed her to launch and scale quickly. EcoBloom is now thriving, and Anya credits a lot of that success to her quick and strategic funding decisions.
That's inspiring. What about the second case study?
This one features Ben and his health tech startup, Health Hub. Ben was developing a remote patient monitoring system, perfect for the rapidly growing telehealth market. He had a great product and a strong team. But again, traditional funding was just too slow.
He needed to move fast to capitalize on the market opportunity. So what did he do?
Ben really took a diversified approach.
Right.
He secured a microloan to cover some initial operating costs, dipped his toes into peer-to-peer lending, and also secured a business line of credit to provide that financial safety net.
So he was prepared for both planned and unplanned expenses.
Smart move. How much did he end up raising, and how long did it take?
He secured $90,000 in just 2 months.
2 months. That's incredible. And what impact did that quick funding have on his business?
It allowed him to scale rapidly and expand to multiple states. Within a year of launching, he was able to seize that market opportunity because he had the funding in place to move quickly. These are such great examples of how alternative funding can really make a difference for startups. But it's not always smooth sailing, right? I imagine there are some common pitfalls that startups should be aware of.
Absolutely. Firesquid Capital's research highlighted a few mistakes that they see startups make all the time. One of the biggest is overlooking non-dilutive funding options, like grants. Many founders get so focused on equity-based funding that they forget about these opportunities to secure capital without giving up any ownership in their company.
It's like leaving free money on the table.
Exactly. Another common mistake is underestimating the time and effort required for fundraising. Many founders go into this process thinking it'll be a quick and easy win, but the reality is it takes time to research options, craft a compelling pitch, and build relationships with potential investors.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
That's a great way to put it. And speaking of marathons, another mistake is not diversifying funding sources. Putting all your eggs in one basket can be very risky, especially in the volatile world of startups.
So instead of just focusing on VC funding, for example, explore peer-to-peer lending, crowdfunding, grants, and even consider bootstrapping with your own funds if possible. It's about spreading the risk and giving yourself multiple paths to success.
Exactly. Now, I know we've talked a lot about the benefits of alternative funding, but it's important to acknowledge that traditional funding still has its place. To get a more holistic perspective on this, I reached out to Dr. Evelyn Reed, a seasoned financial strategist specializing in early-stage startups.
Oh, I've heard great things about Dr. Reed. What were her thoughts on navigating this landscape?
She emphasized the importance of a strategic blend of traditional and alternative funding approaches. In her experience, startups that combine these approaches are often the most successful.
Interesting. So it's not about choosing one over the other, but rather finding the right mix for your specific needs and goals.
Exactly. And that's where data-driven decision-making comes in. Don't just rely on gut feeling or what you hear through the grapevine. Look at the data, analyze the trends, and make informed choices based on solid research. To get more information about Firesquid Capital and its lending products, visit firesquidcapital.com.
Speaking of data-driven decisions, Firesquid Capital offered some fantastic pro tips in their report. I'm eager to dive into those. What were some of their key recommendations?
They recommended starting your funding search early. Don't wait until you're down to your last dollar to start exploring options. Give yourself ample time to research, network, and refine your pitch.
So being proactive is key. Don't let funding become a last-minute fire drill.
Exactly. And remember that diversification we talked about. Well, that applies to your outreach strategy as well. Don't limit yourself to just one type of investor or funding platform. Explore all your options and see what fits best.
It's about casting a wide net
Yeah.
and being open to different possibilities.
Right. And don't underestimate the power of a compelling, data-driven pitch. Investors want to see the numbers. They want to understand your market, and they want to believe in your vision.
So it's not just about passion. It's about backing that passion up with solid research and a well-articulated plan.
Absolutely. And finally, never underestimate the power of networking. Attend industry events, connect with other founders, reach out to mentors, and build relationships with potential investors.
It's all about building those connections and getting your name out there.
Exactly. And remember to leverage your community for support and validation. Your early adopters, your beta testers, your social media followers, they can be your biggest champions.
They can provide valuable feedback, spread the word about your product or service, and even become investors themselves.
It's a powerful reminder that building a strong community is essential for any successful startup.
It really does take a village to build a successful startup.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to circle back to one of the most important takeaways. From Firesquid Capital's research, that alternative funding options can be an absolute game changer for startups.
Exactly. They offer that much-needed speed, flexibility, and community support that traditional methods often lack.
And they open up so many doors for startups that might otherwise struggle to get off the ground.
So as you consider your funding strategy, remember to use the data and insights from Firesquid Capital's research to make informed, strategic choices.
Don't be afraid to think outside the box and explore all your options.
To get more information about Firesquid Capital and its lending products, visit firesquidcapital.com.
Now let's wrap up with a final thought-provoking question for you.
What funding strategy will you use to launch your dream?
Will you stick with the traditional path? Or will you embrace the agility and innovation of alternative options?
The choice is yours. But remember, with the right information and a bit of courage, anything is possible.
So go out there, chase your dreams, and build the future you envision.
We're here to cheer you on every step of the way.